Okay, we're a couple minutes after, so I want to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. Again, this week we have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Pilarz. And I wanted to start by also thanking Dr. Jenny Romick, who is our host today and invited Dr. Pilarz. So thank you so much for that. And I know that Jenny's known to everyone, has been here a few times now, but I'll just let you know again, for anyone who doesn't know, that she is the director of the West Coast Poverty Center and also one of its founding members. And so I'll just remind everyone before I turn it over to Jenny for the formal introduction that as usual, we will put our questions in Q&A, or just let me know that you have a question and we'll work through those together at the end. I can unmute you so you can just go ahead and talk directly with the panel, and it's nice to hear from you, so please do that. Also, there's a student meeting afterwards, so as usual, we'll put in the chat that link. And so for all the students, please join that meeting and hear more from Dr. Pilarz and about her work and her career. So thank you again, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Romick.
Okay, hello everybody. Before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that I am the CSDE headquarters, now empty, work and I live on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people and of the people of the Salish Sea. And I just want to recognize their attachment to this land since time immemorial, and hope that our work here honors their history and their present and their future. So with that, welcome everybody. Particular welcome today to the West Coast Poverty Center seminar students who are joining us. Today's talk is co-sponsored by the West Coast Poverty Center. And I'm pleased to announce a colleague who just reminded me that she invited me to speak at the University of Chicago in 8 years ago this fall, I think. And that was back when invitations came with a trip and a dinner. And so Alejandra, I'm sorry we can't provide that to you today, but hopefully sometime in the future. Dr. Alejandra Raz Pilarz is an assistant professor at the Rosenbaum School of Social Work at the other UW, the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is a social work scholar with both her master's and doctorate in that. Her doctoral dissertation committee at the University of Chicago included Dr. Heather Hill, then there, and today in our CSDE community and audience. Alejandra at Wisconsin is also an affiliate of the Institute for Research on Poverty, which coordinates the collaborative of U.S. poverty centers, of which the West Coast Poverty Center is a member. So multiple scholarly networks intersecting here. Dr. Pilarz's research focuses on parental employment, childcare, and early education, and how these things contribute to child well-being. She, as a macro social welfare scholar, she thinks a lot about public policies, and also the conditions of work and the labor force. So she'll be talking today about a feature of the labor market, mothers' work schedules in the US and trends over time. Again, we'll welcome clarifying questions or substantive questions throughout in the Q&A. I have permission to interject with any quick clarifying questions, and then we'll have some time for discussion at the end. So thanks, Alejandra. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see. All right, great. Can everybody see my slides okay? Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here, but I'm very sad I'm not in Seattle, as I would really have loved to visit and be eating some delicious oysters. But nonetheless, I'm delighted to be here and to share this work. So a little bit of a background. This project is sort of part of a bigger sort of set of studies that are really trying to understand the extent to which mothers' employment in non-standard work schedules and mothers as in the intersection with work hours, the extent to which this has changed over time over the past about 30 years. And so this bigger project also looks at mothers' work schedules and child well-being and family well-being, as well as looking at work schedules and children's care arrangements and parents' time with kids. It's sort of a bigger set of studies. And this is really the first study that is just trying to understand the extent to which mothers' work schedules have changed over time, which surprisingly we don't really know much about. And I want to acknowledge this is joint work with Anna Walter, who's a doctoral student at the School of Social Work, UW-Madison, I think is here in the audience. And so this is our first time presenting this work, so we very excited for your feedback and to get some ideas for where to go next. So I think everybody knows mothers' labor force participation increased dramatically in the latter half of the 20th century. This figure just to remind us of how rapid the rates of mothers' labor force participation rates increased from 1960 through about the late 1990s, after which kind of became more stable over the last few years and kind of took a dip during the Great Recession and recovered a bit since then. And so at the same time that mothers were increasing their labor force participation, there are also been important changes in the economy and labor market. And particularly job quality has declined and jobs have become more polarized. And so what I mean by that is that there's been increasing wage inequality, especially with some wage stagnation, as well as less secure, more unstable employment among less educated workers. And part of this is driven by a growth in the service sector, build a 24/7 economy, right, that requires workers to work during non-standard times outside of traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday schedules. And then also just-in-time scheduling practices, meaning that workers are tying customer demand more closely to labor supply and passing that on to workers who are experiencing more unstable or unpredictable work schedules. And so all of these things are sort of taking place at the same time, which suggests that mothers' employment experiences likely differ markedly today than in previous decades. And in particular, this suggests that mothers today might be more likely to be working non-standard, unpredictable schedules than in previous decades, and that they might be more likely to be working non-standard schedules out of necessity rather than to maximize parental time with children, for example. So what we're really interested in doing in this study is sort of understanding in the past about 30 years or so, how has mothers' work schedules changed? This key aspect of mothers' employment conditions, mothers' work schedules, has this changed over time? And it could be, as I said, that mothers are increasingly working non-standard schedules, or it could be because these schedules are difficult for mothers to manage, along with raising children and families, that they might be opting out of these or out of the labor force or into just daytime schedules. So really interesting in understanding how these different phenomena come together. Why are we focusing on work schedules? Well, there's pretty consistent research showing that parental non-standard schedules are associated with adverse child and family well-being outcomes. So I've listed a whole host of things here, but for example, when parents work non-standard schedules, they are more likely to they experience higher levels of parenting stress or depressive symptoms, other mental health problems. There's also evidence that there's a lower relationship quality between parents when one of them works a non-standard schedule. This also then gets passed down to kids with when mothers work non-standard schedules, it's associated with less parent-child activities, particularly developmentally supportive activities like reading or doing homework, as well as less consistent family routines and poor parenting practices. And in turn, then non-standard schedules have been associated with adverse child outcomes, including child behavior problems and somewhat less consistently lower cognitive and academic skills. And among parents of young kids, working non-standard schedules is also associated with lower rates of center-based childcare and early education participation, which is also supports children's development and promotes their readiness for kindergarten. So in general, right, the evidence is suggesting that we should be concerned about this. It's important to acknowledge that in dual earner couples, some parents might be choosing to work non-standard schedules to minimize the use of non-parental childcare, either because this is their preference, they especially for like very young children, right, they might not want their child in non-parental care, but it's also likely that it's because they might be unable to afford childcare, and so they are sort of tag teaming or working non-overlapping schedules because they cannot afford non-parental care. And another reason why we are interested in looking at these changes over time is that if lower socioeconomic status parents, lower income parents, less educated parents, and racial ethnic minority parents are increasingly likely to work these schedules, non-standard schedules, this could be one factor that's contributing to increasing inequality between families. And so, so this is sort of what led us to these questions today. I want to just make a note about what we know about the prevalence of non-standard work schedules among mothers. We have, there's been quite a few studies that provide point in time estimates of mothers' non-standard work schedule rates. However, these estimates vary quite substantially. They cover different periods, different years. They cover different measures of non-standard work schedules and different sample composition. So for example, in one study, White and colleagues find that 12% of moms with kids under age 18 work most hours outside of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So they're like the traditional work hours, but they're using time diary data. So they just have these measures for this one day, one point in time. And then a different study finds that 27% of low-income working moms with children under 12 self-report working a non-standard schedule. And this is in 2010. So you see widely different rates depending on how things are defined and who is included in the sample. So we don't really have a good, from current literature, way of knowing the extent to which things have, these schedules have changed. We do know from prior research that in general, younger moms, Black moms, unmarried, less educated, and low-income workers and moms, and those who are in service occupations are more likely to work non-standard schedules. There is one recent study by Peter Hepburn that looked at the rates of non-standard work schedules among moms in 1990 and in 2012. He uses two different data sets, two different studies, one from 1990 and one from 2012, and sort of uses the same, they both have weekly calendar data. And so he compares the rates in these 2 point in time studies. And he does find evidence that rates of non-standard schedules among moms have increased, particularly for working variable schedules, weekends, and for single moms working evenings. But unfortunately, because this is 2 point in time studies, we don't really know anything about what happened, in between 1990 or 2012 or what's happened since 2012. So in the study, we want to look at over a longer time period and more years of data and to see how things have changed. So the aims of the study are to examine trends in mothers' work schedules over time for all moms, as well as by race, ethnicity, education, family structure, and the age of the youngest child. And we're going to estimate associations between maternal and family characteristics in mothers' work schedules. And what we're really interested in is whether these associations have changed over time, which will tell us the extent to which distribution of non-standard schedules among different groups of moms has changed over time. And then we also are going to look at, to try to get at this question of why moms might be working non-standard schedules, we're going to look at mothers' reasons for work, self-reported reasons for working non-standard schedules, as well as a measure of tag team parenting. And again, by that, I mean when parents work non-overlapping schedules. So to do this, we're going to use data from the SIP, the Survey of Income and Program Participation. This is a household-based survey that uses a continuous series of national panels. Many of you might be familiar with this. It's a long-running survey since the 1980s, and there's sort of two ways to think about the SIP. There was the 1984 to 2008 panels included households that were followed over about 4-year period and were interviewed about 3 times per year. And in 2014, the SIP was then redesigned and households were only interviewed now once per year. So the administration of the survey changed a bit in sort of pre and post 2014. In the earlier panels, work schedule information was collected via topical modules, which were administered at least 1 way per panel, but not really in any consistent sort of increments of time. So, they were not administered yearly, for example. And in the topical modules, respondents reported up to 2 jobs worked in the previous week. So we have information on work schedules and hours and other job characteristics for up to 2 jobs in the previous month. In 2014, when it moved to the yearly administration of the survey, they got rid of the topical modules, and they now ask these work schedule questions every year for up to 7 jobs worked in the previous year. So to make estimates, pre and post 2014 as comparable as possible, we focus on respondents' primary job worked in the last month. And we define the primary job as the one that they work the most hours per week. So across all of the panels, all of the waves, we look at the job that they work the most hours per week. The advantages of these data is, as I'm going to talk about in a second, they use the same, the measures of work schedules are consistent over time. So even though the administration of the SIP changed, they still ask the same items about work schedules, which we think give us comparable measures and over a long period of time. But again, we don't have yearly measures, which would be ideal. We have some gaps of 1 year, some gaps of 3 years, 4 years. So it kind of varies over time. Okay, so a little bit more about the sample. So in our sample, we include all waves that had a work schedule topical module between the 1987 and 2008 panels. And this covers calendar years 88 to 2011. And for the 2014 panel, we have, the yearly surveys. It covers 2013 to 2016 calendar years. And we pool all the waves, sort of treating each as a cross-sectional sample and using the SIP weights to produce nationally representative estimates. Our sample includes women ages 18 and older who have at least 1 child and live with that child. So our sample is pretty huge. We have about 135,000 moms over the entire period. In some models, we restrict to moms who are currently working. And then when we look at just tag team parenting, we look at moms who are married and whose spouse was employed and whom the mom was also working. We unfortunately can't find cohabiting moms until 1996 panel. So while we do some analyses that look at cohabiting moms, we're focusing mostly on married and unmarried because that's we can consistently identify over this time period. All right, so in terms of our measures of work schedules, we use 3 pieces of information from the SIP that were collected consistently over time. First is just their self-reported work schedule, which is whether they regularly work daytime, evening, night, rotating split, or a regular schedule, meaning that that changes day to day. We also have the start and end times of a typical day of work. And then we have the days of week that they work during a typical week. So we use these 3 pieces of information to create a measure of non-standard schedules that looks at, that has these categories: fixed daytime, evening, night, rotating split, or regular schedule. So we use the start and end times of the typical day of work to categorize people into either a fixed daytime shift, which means that they work most hours between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., fixed evening shift, which means they work most hours between 4 p.m. and 12 a.m., and a fixed night shift, which means most hours between midnight and 8 a.m. If they said that they worked a rotating or split schedule or an irregular schedule, regardless of when they worked, they get categorized into rotating or split or an irregular schedule. And then this measure, we use this measure in part because this is measure used by Harriet Presser's sort of seminal work on non-standard schedules, and we wanted to sort of be able to make it comparable to prior research. We've also looked at, just using the self-reported measure, we find really similar trends and patterns, so we don't see a big difference if we just use the self-reported measure. And then in some variations, we just look at, actually most of the findings I'm going to show today, we're going to look at working any non-standard schedule, which is anything but fixed daytime. And then we also look at working non-standard schedules by part-time or full-time work hours. I'm not going to talk about this today, but we also use the days of week worked to look at weekend work. And so I'm happy to chat a little bit more about that, but I'm not going to be showing findings from that today. Okay, and then to look at tag team parenting, so we do this a couple of different ways. First, we just look at the percentage of moms who work a fixed daytime shift and whose partner also works a fixed daytime shift. This is sort of the inverse of tag teaming, where they both work at the same time. So, the proportion that does not work both fixed days is the proportion that could be potentially tag teaming. And then we also look using these certain end times. We look at in Workday, we look at the percentage overlap between mother's work schedules and her partner's work schedules, her work times. And so we define top team parenting as this, we use a couple different measures, but the one I'm going to talk mostly about today is just 0%. So this is the most conservative, where they have no overlap at all in their work times. And then to look at reasons for working schedules, as I said, the SIP has an item about, what is the main reason that you worked your schedule. And we're going to look at any involuntary reason, the vast majority of which say is requirement of the job. And then I'm also going to show you one voluntary reason, which is better childcare arrangements. So moms who say that they work for better childcare arrangements. Okay, in terms of maternal and family characteristics, these are pretty straightforward: mother's age, race, ethnicity, level of education, family structure. As I mentioned, we can only look at married and unmarried, but we do break out the unmarried moms into living with other adults who could potentially be their partner, and then unmarried moms who are single and living without other adults. I'm going to show you findings today that focus on the moms, sort of the full sample of moms. We do also do some models that look at just working moms and also look at income and occupation, mother's occupation in those models. I'm happy to talk about those, but today I'm going to just be focusing on the full sample of moms. So if you're interested in how mother's occupation matters, you're welcome to ask me in the Q&A. I have about 1 million extra slides that I can show in Q&A. All right. So our analysis is really straightforward. We're estimating, just proportion of moms working non-standard schedules in each year, again, by race, ethnicity, education, family structure, age of youngest child, to look at, maternal and family characteristics that are associated with working a non-standard schedule. We estimate multinomial logit models that regress our, multi-category measure of work schedules on these characteristics with month and year fixed effects. And then I'm going to show you the average marginal effects from those models. We can look at percentage point differences between groups. And then what we're really interested in, right, is looking at changes over time in these associations. So we add interactions between a year and then each of these characteristics, race, ethnicity, education, family structure, and age of youngest child. And all of our analyses are at the mother level and are weighted using the SIP weights. Okay, so finally, to show you some trends here. So what do we find? So rates of non-standard schedule are pretty stable over time. This might be, and depending on how small your screen is hard to see. But if you look at this green line down here, starting with this figure, the percentage of moms who are working any type of non-standard schedule, that's the green line, is pretty flat at between 15 to 16%. It peaked at 18% in 1997. Right when we see like mom's employment especially increase, and then it's gone down to about 14% in 2016. If you look at this, well, actually, first, if you look at the blue line, which is the portion of moms not working, with the inverse being right that they're employed, we see, consistent with prior research showing like sort of big increases in employment or declines in not working in the 90s, and sort of again, the Great Recession sort of impacting moms here, and then more recently increases in employment or decreases in not working. So we have seen in recent years that moms are increasingly working, but they're working not daytime schedules, not non-standard schedules. When we look at things by part-time and full-time employment, the red line is daytime full-time. Again, you see increases in working a regular daytime schedule full-time. This down here shows, pretty stable, some decreases in part-time daytime that's picked up again, and then again, slight increases in working non-standard full-time over non-standard part-time, but not a whole lot of change in sort of working and thinking about working non-standard schedules. When we look also then just at working moms, so those who are working, this is the line for moms. This is a proportion of moms working any non-standard schedule, any type of non-standard schedule. Again, really pretty flat at about 25%, has been declining in recent years down to about 21% in 2016. When we look by the type of work schedule that moms are working, this is this graph over here. We break this out against just working moms. We break it out by their type of non-standard schedule. a majority of moms are, or I guess the most prevalent form of non-standard schedule is an irregular schedule with about 10%. This did increase in the late 2000s Great Recession, but since then has really been declining pretty substantially down from a peak of about 12% in 2010, 2011 to about 8%. Moms are then most likely then to work fixed evenings or rotating split schedules. Again, not a whole lot of change, maybe some recent increase in evening work in the last few years. And moms working nights has really stayed pretty consistent, a slight uptick in the Great Recession, but about around 3 percentage points over this period. So not a ton of change. Okay, so next I'm going to show you trends by race and ethnicity. These are kind of hard to see because this is a bit overlapping, so I will do my best to point this out to you. So there's a few things I want to point out. So first, it's just that if you look at this red line for the Black moms have generally been increasing employment in non-standard schedules, up from about 11% in 91 to about peaking at 22% in 2015, and then down to about 18% in 2016. By contrast, white moms have generally been declining their employment in non-standard schedules from about 17% to about 14% in 2016. These are, relatively small percentage point differences, but I think it's a point to remember that these are, relatively small base rates of non-standard schedules. And then we see Hispanic moms are generally just less likely than other groups to be working non-standard schedules, as well as to be working at all. And I'm just showing you the daytime schedules for comparison, but I'm not going to go into detail on those for the sake of time. Okay, when we look at maternal education, difference in maternal education, first, as you might expect, higher educated moms are just much more likely to be working. This graph shows you, working a daytime schedule, but you see a very similar pattern if you look at just overall employment rates. Right, so higher educated moms more likely to be working, also more likely to be working a regular daytime schedule. There's not when we look at just working any non-standard schedule, the main sort of pattern that stands out here is that while moms with less than a college degree have generally been staying flat or slightly increasing employment in non-standard schedules, moms with a 4-year college degree have been declining over time, especially since the Great Recession, and are now sort of lower rates of non-standard schedules compared to the other groups. I forgot to say, I'm showing you again, this is employment among all moms, but these patterns are actually more pronounced. The gaps look bigger when we look at moms who are working. And these patterns are also sort of more pronounced for moms who are working non-standard full-time schedules rather than part-time schedules. Oh, and again here, so looking at working moms, I forgot I included the slide. So this you see, right, as in particular, you see that moms with a 4-year college degree are really pulling away from the rest of the moms. When we look at family structure, a similar story in the sense that married moms are increasingly reducing rates of work in non-standard schedules, while single moms are either increasing or staying relatively the same. So again, we see a decline among married moms from about 17% in 88 to 13% in 2016. And these patterns are more pronounced for working non-standard full-time schedules rather than part-time schedules. And again, bigger gaps or more pronounced differences when we look at just working moms. We don't see a whole lot of change in trends by age of youngest child. All groups are sort of equally likely to be working any non-standard schedule. However, when we look only, I have this slide. When we look only at working moms with youngest kids are more likely to be working a non-standard schedule compared to moms with older kids. Okay, so what I've shown you is just like the overall trends and then the trends by these different groups. What I'm gonna do next is first show you, again, results from these regression models that put all of these maternal and family characteristics in the same model, and look at who, across all years, who's more likely to be working a non-standard schedule. And then I'm gonna show you the the marginal effects for each year of the data to look at how these associations have changed over time. So when we look just across all the years of data, this is adjusting for, this is with year and month fixed effects. We see that overall, consistent with prior research, so younger moms are more likely to work a non-standard schedule. These coefficients, again, are the average marginal effects. So the way we interpret these is, for example, when we look at moms 25 to 34 years of age, they are 2.8 percentage points less likely to be working any non-standard schedule compared to moms who are 18 to 24 years of age. And we look at any non-standard schedule, full-time non-standard schedule, and then part-time non-standard schedule. Okay, so younger moms are more likely to be working non-standard schedules. Black moms are more likely to be working a non-standard full-time schedule, but less likely to be working a part-time non-standard schedule over this whole period. Hispanic moms are just less likely to be working, either. And then Asian and other race ethnicity moms look similar to Black moms in terms of being more likely to work full-time and less likely to work part-time. When we look by education, and again, this is all moms, not just working moms. So moms who have a 4-year college degree are less likely to be working full-time non-standard schedule, right? These are positive coefficients for moms with less than high school, and some college. But they are more likely to be working a part-time non-standard schedule than the least educated moms. When we look by marital status, we see that moms who are single living with other adults, single and either living with other adults or not living with other adults are both more likely to be working any non-standard schedule, a full-time non-standard schedule, but slightly less likely than married moms to be working a part-time non-standard schedule. And again, we find because we have such a big sample, we can detect some really small differences. And then when we look at, number of kids, moms with more kids are more likely to be working part-time non-standard schedule, especially. And again, with age of youngest child, as we saw in the figure, they're more likely to be working. Mom with youngest kids are more likely to be working part-time non-standard schedules, but less likely to be working full-time non-standard schedules. And again, this could be because they are, managing childcare and trying to minimize non-parental care. Okay, so so this is, and again, this is pretty consistent with prior research in terms of what we're seeing, that sort of less educated moms and single moms are more likely to work some non-standard schedule, especially full-time. What we're really interested in, though, is looking at, again, changes in the associations over time. So what I'm going to show you next, again, is figures that plot this marginal average marginal effects, but for each year. So instead of over the whole period, you're going to see for each year, and they'll be relative to the reference group. So like Black moms relative to white mom, et cetera. Okay, so first we see that Black moms have become as or more likely than white moms to work a non-standard schedule over time. So this is for, again, the marginal effects for working any non-standard schedule, and then this is full-time non-standard schedule. And so what you can see is in the earlier years in the data, Black moms were less likely to be working a non-standard schedule, and they have, increased employment in non-standard schedules with a dip in the Great Recession, and are now sort of more likely to be working non-standard schedules. And this is actually, more pronounced here if you look at the full-time non-standard schedules. If we look only at working moms, these patterns are actually more pronounced. These gaps are bigger, and so a stronger trend. We don't see any differences between white and Asian moms in terms of associations with working a non-standard schedule over time. We see somewhat of a similar pattern for Hispanic moms as we do for Black moms, except that Hispanic moms never become more likely to work non-standard schedules. They just sort of increase their employment in non-standard schedules to look more like white moms, but don't surpass white moms' rates of non-standard schedules. I think I'm doing okay on time. Okay, so turning now to by education, we see that less educated moms have become more likely to work non-standard schedules over time compared to those with a college degree. This is particularly noticeable for those with some college versus college. Again, all moms, less educated moms see like a dip in the Great Recession. Less educated moms are more affected by the Great Recession. And again, if we look at only working moms, we see the same pattern as we do here. Again, single moms have become more likely to work non-standard schedules compared to married moms. These patterns are concentrated in full-time non-standard schedules. We see few differences in working part-time non-standard schedules. And again, if we look just at working moms, we see the same thing. We don't see much difference though in terms of difference by age of the youngest child. There's some like fluctuations, but no sort of consistent trend suggesting that one group is looking different than the other groups. Okay, so now we're going to look at why mothers work non-standard or why mothers work non-standard schedules for involuntary or voluntary reasons. So what we find is that so what I'm showing you here is just by each of these work schedule types: daytime full-time, non-standard full-time, daytime part-time, and non-standard part-time. We're looking at the proportion of moms who work non-standard schedules for an involuntary reason. And this could be, again, it was a requirement of the job, they couldn't get any other job, or some other reason. And so what we find is, first, moms who work daytime full-time are most likely to report involuntary reasons, whereas those who work either non-standard part-time or daytime part-time are more likely or less likely to report involuntary reasons. That's pretty consistent over time. But we see a pretty significant spike among all groups since 2009 in the proportion reporting an involuntary reason for working a non-standard schedule. The increase is sort of most pronounced for these part-time folks who really are much more likely to work an involuntary reason. And so we wanted to look at like the flip side, right? Do we also then see a decline in parents saying, especially interested in childcare arrangements, right? Because these are moms. Are they also then reporting a decline in voluntary reasons? So we see that, similarly, since about 2009, moms are less likely to report that they're working a non-standard schedule for better childcare arrangements. And these, again, this is most common among daytime part-time and non-standard part-time workers, but has, taken a dip in the last, since 2009. So then we wanted to see, well, what do we find if we look at tag team parenting? Again, thinking about parents who work non-overlapping schedules, might be working non-standard schedules so that they can, avoid non-parental care because they can't afford care. So these figures show you the proportion of married working moms who work daytime schedules and their partner works daytime schedules. And so the inverse of this is the probability, is the potential portion of moms who might potentially be tag team parenting. So if you both work a fixed day, you can't tag team parent. So an increase from about 60% to 65% of moms who work a daytime schedule and partner works a daytime schedule means that there's fewer moms who are potentially tag team parenting. And then when we look by the age of mom's youngest kid, this again is the increase in moms working daytime schedule and partner working daytime schedule for 0 to 5-year-old moms in particular. So then we look at the percentage of moms' work hours that overlap with their partner's work hours and work schedule. And as I mentioned, we look at the percentage. So we cut this a couple of different ways. First, just looking at like no overlap at all, and then allowing for some potential, measurement error or so some overlap, up to 0 to 25% overlap. And both look really similar trends. So about 10% of married working mothers have 0% overlap with their partner's work schedule. And that has declined again since about 2009 or so, from about 10% to about 7 or 8%. And again, if we look by age of youngest child, you can see the 0 to 5-year-old moms are more likely to tag team parent, but that has declined over in the last few years. When we look at tag team parenting by mothers' work schedules, we see that tag team parenting is more prevalent among moms who work non-standard schedules, particularly part-time non-standard schedules. That's this yellow line. The red line is non-standard full-time. This is sort of, this has sort of was consistent over 90s, started to decline in the 2000s, and then sort of peaked a bit during the Great Recession, but has also been on the decline since about 2010. So pretty consistent pattern here, suggesting that since 2009, 2010, working moms are maybe less likely to be working, for better childcare arrangements for tag team parenting. Okay. Oh, good. I'm doing fine on time. All right. So to sort of through a lot of data and figures and things at you. So I want to sort of sum up what the key takeaway points are. So overall, we find that mothers' employment in jobs with non-standard schedules has remained fairly constant over time, a slight decline in recent years. It's possible that our estimates are to the extent that we can make them comparable to other studies that, as I said, vary quite significantly who they include in their sample and how they measure work schedules are pretty in line with prior research. And again, the advantage of our study is that we can use the same measures to look at this over time. It's possible that we expected that we might find increases in non-standard schedules among moms, right? Given what we know about changes in the labor market and in jobs. So it's somewhat unexpected that it'd be slight decline in recent years, but we also think it's possible, given that moms are saying that they are more likely to involuntarily work these schedules, that they might just be self-selecting out of working non-standard schedules and either able to choose daytime schedules or opting to stay out of the labor market if they can't get them. Our overall, though, trends, right, in non-standard schedules mask important differences by race, ethnicity, education, and family structure. So we see that Black moms, less educated moms, and single moms have become more likely to work non-standard schedules, especially full-time non-standard schedules. And these patterns look quite similar when we look at weekend work too. And so this could be, this could be concerning to the extent that non-standard schedules have negative implications for these moms. And then, we note this decline since 2009, both in mothers working non-standard schedules voluntarily and in tag team parenting, which, tag team parenting sort of peaked in the late 90s and then has been on the decline, especially since 2010. So again, to the extent that parental non-standard schedules, to the extent we think that these negatively impact child and family well-being, we might be concerned that they could be contributing to inequality by race, education, and family structure. I think it's important to note that I think that the counterfactual matters, right? If moms are more likely to be working in non-standard schedules versus being not employed, that could be positive for family well-being and for increased family income. Even though moms working non-standard schedule might be stressful, the increase in income might be big enough that it offsets, right, the potential negative effects. So that's an important thing to note. But when we only look at working moms, we still see these differences by race, education, family structure. So even among moms who are working, we see these differences by these characteristics. And then I think it's also important to understand the how non-standard schedules might be impacting families differently under this context and compared to previous decades. And a lot of the research uses data that's getting kind of old in the 1990s, early 2000s. So we think they might have a different impact now. So it's important to understand what the association between non-standard schedules and child and family well-being look like in today's context. Our findings, suggest, I think, a need for policies that give workers more control over their schedules, that they can, work a schedule that works for that accommodates and works with their family responsibilities. Importantly, we could not look at other aspects of precarious work schedules. So, it is quite possible that even though moms are not working non-standard schedules more frequently, they are working more unstable and unpredictable schedules. And so I don't want to lose sight of that, which is something we can't really address with our data. We can look at irregular schedules, but that doesn't capture all aspects, right, of precarious work. Okay, in terms of briefly just talking about what we're thinking about next. So we have a few questions that we're working on. One is, to what extent might mothers coordinate work schedules with other household members? So we've also know that parents are increasingly living like grandparents or other extended family, and to what extent might they be playing a role in helping with childcare. We're going to be looking at how the associations between non-standard schedules and children's care arrangements, both thinking of parents' time with kids and with kids' time in non-parental care, how those have changed over time, especially given that there have been pretty significant investments in early care and education, since the late 1990s that may have contributed to how to parents' decisions about childcare and early education. And then finally, just looking at how non-standard schedules are associated with child and family well-being in a contemporary sample of families. And that's all I have. And I want to say a quick thank you to the UW-Madison Center for Demography and Ecology and the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Graduate Education for supporting this project. And thank you all. Look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Alejandra. That was great. And you actually answered a few of my questions.
Oh, good.
Okay. But I will take the chair's prerogative to ask the first question, and I invite folks in the audience to enter questions in the Q&A, or if you don't want to bother formulating your question into actual text, you can just say, I have a question, and Maria can unmute you to ask. But I was actually very curious about something you alluded to, which is how does occupation or industry matter here? Because we think of some of these schedules as being much more prevalent in hospitality or service industry jobs. And so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we haven't broken this into, right now we're using like the 6 major occupation types, which are, useful, but not the most useful. So one we're mostly interested in, right, service occupations. So we do see that non-standard schedules are concentrated in service occupations, particularly part-time. I mean, both non-standard and part-time, but particularly part-time. Those who are in service are more likely to work those. I might have a figure. Let me see if I have one. And I can show you. I have about a million figures with extra slides, so it might take me a second. Oh, here we go. Let me share this.
While you're looking at that, I'll note your co-author Anna. Noted that you also found that lower paid workers are more likely to work non-standard schedules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, low-income moms are more likely to be working. Among working moms, low-income moms are more likely to be working non-standard schedules. This shows you by occupation the proportion.
You need to share it again, I think.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I think you need to share it again.
Oh, it didn't work? Oh, sorry.
Somebody else. I'm seeing you on your slide. Oh, wait, no, it does work. Okay, yeah, now I can. I had the wrong view, sorry.
No. I think I just forgot one step. So this just is proportion of working mother. Oh, this is full-time non-standard schedule. Oh, this is any non-standard schedule by occupation. So those in the service industry have the highest rates of non-standard schedules, but not as much of those in so we have a sort of a combination of like operators, production, and like farming, forestry, and fishing, because those are the smallest occupations. So we lump them all together, but those also have pretty high rates of full-time non-standard. And then service occupations particularly have the highest rates of part-time non-standard. And I think we've looked at, this by like irregular schedules, and they also have high rates of irregular schedules. Yeah. So if you wanted to look at the income, this is among working moms only. This just shows you the marginal effects, but those who are, under 100% FPL are most likely work any non-standard schedule, and particularly most likely to work part-time non-standard schedule. Those actually who are just above poverty are more likely to work full-time than those who are below poverty, which makes sense given that working full-time more likely to get you out of poverty.
So one thing I found that was interesting here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it didn't seem like you found evidence that more advantaged mothers are able to create flexible and non-standard schedules, or I don't know if maybe you didn't kind of look at that, but one way that the workforce may adapt to the needs of more advantaged workers is to giving them what they want, and for that may be more flexible schedule. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, we find there, it's hard to know what is, again, like what's flexible and what's involuntarily, like, fewer hours, or if we look at irregular schedules, I'm trying to think of what the best way to get at this is. So if you look at irregular schedules, those who work irregular schedules, there's not as many differences by education. And I don't know, I guess that's not that's the closest thing we have, like, to variability, right? But we don't know if it's driven by the worker or by the employer. So it's hard to say. We do see, I think, more rates of part-time among higher educated moms do have some higher rates of part-time non-standard, but not full-time non-standard. Yeah, which might be driven by like them wanting to work, fewer hours.
All right, we have a few folks joining the conversation here. The first is another Poverty Center and CSDE affiliate, Anjum Hajat.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
Oh,
yep.
Great. So thank you for that. It was really interesting. We're doing some similar work, so I was really interested to hear your findings. So what we've looked at a little bit is more of this sort of broader concept, not just non-standard work, but the broader concept of precarious employment or poor employment quality. And we've done a couple of papers looking, at a couple different data sources like the HRS and PSID and NLSY. And we see actually quite significant increases in, this precarious work concept. And I'm wondering if but we've never done it in moms, right? Just more generally in workers. But I'm wondering if you've thought about including other indicators of poor employment quality, because, non-standard work sort of goes along with so many other things that are sort of emblematic of a bad job, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the short answer is yes. We thought about, we haven't looked at this yet, but like involuntary part-time work is one of the questions that we do have. But I'm open to suggestions for what other things, we should look at in that. We don't have measures of other precarious work schedule type things, but we have, like work hours, again, involuntary work. We could look at benefits.
Yeah, we've included those types of things: benefits, labor union participation. There is some discussion in the broader literature and the theoretical literature about including wages too, right? Because that's clearly linked, but then that sort of is a little bit messier. And then training opportunities. Do you have the opportunity to move up in your job, or do you is it dead end, right? It's trying to get at those sorts of concepts.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, and CSDE affiliate David Grombowski has a question along a similar vein.
Yeah, I think that the conversation has pretty much touched on my point in that the mothers that have or women that have non-standard work environments probably have less benefits from their employers, like health insurance, paid vacation time, paid sick leave, all the benefits that we as faculty take for granted.
Yeah.
And one thing to think about is in your timeline is that in 2014 is the year of the Medicaid expansion. And so, which went up to 128% of poverty. So there may be, even though if you're not getting health insurance from your employer, there's going to be some segment of low-income people, adults, that are newly eligible for Medicaid insurance, if they choose to sign up, in that window of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Great point.
Okay. I have one final question. We've got just a few minutes left. I was wondering if you have any sense of how this changes with the economy. And in particular, I kept looking at your graphs where there seemed to be some falling of non-standard schedules over the period from 2009 through the end of your data, which is the long recovery or the great recovery after the Great Recession. And I'm curious, just in general, whether you think there's any cyclical pattern to this, and how you can, whether and how you can sort that out
Yeah,
from other trends.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does seem, I feel like there's not a super clear, so we see like increase, it's hard because, so like in the late 1990s, right, where we see increases sort of in all types of schedules because, but it was a good economy, there was other incentives, right, for moms to work. And then yes, during like the Great Recession, especially for like less educated moms, you know, single moms, there was and racial ethnic minority moms, they were more impacted by job losses. They see like a decline both in daytime and in non-standard schedules. But it is interesting that in the then since the economy picked up, there's been a decline. But again, it's really, the decline is really more among, you know, white and college educated and married moms. So it's among the more advantaged moms. So it's not,
but
so
through
yeah.
2016, that's kind of consistent with other information about how the recovery was helping the workforce.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there is like when there are jobs available, like some mom are more likely to you'll get the better jobs than other moms, and so there's still increases in for some groups in sort of worse jobs than others. So that's kind of but yeah, yeah, we've been thinking about that too, and how to think about and again, it's just like college educated moms were hardly affected by the Great Recession. So they were still like working in their daytime schedules. And so, yeah, it's important to look at the subgroups for sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Alejandra. One of the drawbacks of the Zoom webinar is that we don't have emoji reactions. So I'll do the live hands clapping, heart up in the corner. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who attended today and to the CSDE group for getting this so well organized. And thank you also to Jessica Lapham, who is going to be leading the student discussion immediately following, and that link has been in the chat. Anything else here? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And thanks to both of you. It was a great talk. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.